Acres of Diamonds by Russell H. Conwell. Part 12. 9. The Story of Acres of Diamonds. Considering everything, the most remarkable thing in Russell Conwell's remarkable life is his lecture, Acres of Diamonds. That is, the lecture itself, the number of times he has delivered it, what a source of inspiration it has been to the myriads, the money that has been made and is making, and still more, the purpose for which he directs the money. In the circumstances surrounding Acres of Diamonds, in its tremendous success, in the attitude of mind revealed by the lecture itself, and by what Dr. Conwell does with it, it is illuminative of his character, his aims, his ability. The lecture is vibrant with his energy, it flashes with his hopefulness, it is his enthusiasm, it is packed full of his intensity. It stands for the possibilities of success in everyone. He has delivered it over 5,000 times. The demand for it never diminishes. The success grows never less. There is a time in Russell Conwell's youth of which it was a pain for him to think. He told me of it one evening, and his voice sank lower and lower as he went far back into the past. It was of his days at Yale that he spoke, for they were days of suffering, for he had not money for Yale, and in working for more he endured bitter humiliation. It was not that the work was hard, for Russell Conwell has always been ready for hard work. It was not that there were privations and difficulties, for he has always found difficulties only things to overcome, and endured privations with cheerful fortitude. But it was the humiliations that he met, the personal humiliations that after more than half a century make him suffer in remembering them. Yet one of those humiliations came a marvelous result. I determined, he says, that whatever I could do to make the way easier at college for other young men working their way I would do. And so, many years ago, he began to devote every dollar he made from Acres of Diamonds to this definite purpose. He has what may be termed a waiting list. On that list are very few cases he has looked into personally. Infinitely busy man that he is, he cannot do extensive personal investigation. A large proportion of his names come to him from college presidents who know of students in their own college in need of such a helping hand. Every night, he said, when I ask him to tell me about it, when my lecture is over and the check is in my hand, I sit down in my room in the hotel. What a lonely picture, too. I sit down in my room in the hotel and subtract from the total sum received my actual expenses for that place and make out a check for the difference and send it to some young man on my list. And I always send with the check a letter of advice and helpfulness, expressing my hope that it will come to be of some service to him, and telling him that he is to feel under no obligation except to his Lord. I feel strongly, and I try to make every young man feel, that there must be no sense of obligation to me personally, and I tell them that I am hoping to leave behind me men who will do more work than I have done. Don't think that I put in too much advice, he added with a smile, for I only try to let them know that a friend is trying to help them. His face lighted as he spoke. There is such a fascination in it, he exclaimed. It's just like a gamble, and as soon as I have sent the letter and crossed a name off my list, I am aiming for the next one. And after a pause, he added, I do not attempt to send any young man enough for all of his expenses, but I want to save them from bitterness, and each check will help, and two. He concluded naively, in the vernacular, I don't want them to lie down on me. He told me that he made it clear that he did not wish to get returns or reports from this branch of his life work, for it would take a great deal of time in watching and thinking and in reading and writing of letters. But it is mainly, he went on, that I do not wish to hold over their heads a sense of obligation. When I suggested that this was surely an example of bread cast upon the waters that could not return, he was silent for a little and then said thoughtfully, as one gets on in years, there is satisfaction in doing a thing for the sake of doing it. The bread returns in the sense of effort made. On a recent trip through Minnesota, he was positively upset, so his secretary told me. though being recognized on a train by a young man who he had helped through Acres of Diamonds, and who, finding that this was really Dr. Conwell, eagerly brought his wife to join him in the most fervent thanks for his assistance. Both the husband and wife were so emotionally overcome that it quite overcame Dr. Conwell himself. The lecture, to quote the noble words of Dr. Conwell himself, is designed to help every person of either sex who cherishes the high resolve of sustaining a career of usefulness and honor. It is the lecture of helpfulness, and it is a lecture, when given with Conwell's voice and face and manner, that is full of fascination, and yet it is so simple. It is packed full of inspiration, of suggestion, of aid. He alters it to meet the local circumstances of the thousands of different places in which he delivers it, but the base remains the same, and even those to whom it is an old story will go and hear it time after time. It amuses him to say that he knows individuals who have listened to it 20 times. He begins with a story told to Conwell by an old Arab as the two journeyed toward Nineveh. And as to listen, you hear the actual voices and you see the sands of the deserts and the waving palms. The lecturer's voice is so easy, so effortless, it seems so ordinary and matter-of-fact, yet the entire scene is instantly vital and alive. Instantly the man and his audience under a sort of spell, eager to listen, ready to be merry or grave. He has the faculty of control, the vital quality that makes him the orator. The same people who will go and hear this lecture over and over, and that is the kind of tribute that Conwell likes. I recently heard him deliver it in his own church, where it would naturally be thought to be an old story, and where presumably only a few of the faithful would go. But it was quite clear that all of his church are the faithful, for it was a large audience that came to listen to him. Hardly a seat in the great auditorium was vacant, and it should be added that although it was in his own church, it was not a free lecture, where a throng might be expected, but each one paid a liberal sum for a seat, and having paid of admission is always a practical test of the sincerity of desire to hear, and the people were swept along by the current as if the lecturer and lecture were of novel interest. The lecture itself is good to read, but it is only when it is illuminated by Conwell's vivid personality that one understands how it influences in the actual delivery. On that particular evening, he decided to give the lecture in the same form as when it was first delivered many years ago, without any of the alterations that have come with time and changing localities. And as he went on, with the audience rippling and bubbling with laughter as usual, he never doubted that he was giving it as he had given it in the years before, and yet so up to date and alive must he necessarily be, in spite of the definite effort to set himself back. Every once in a while he was coming out with illustrations from such distinctively recent things as the automobile. The last time I heard him was the 5,124th time for the lecture. Doesn't it seem incredible? 5,124 times. I noticed that he was to deliver it in a little out-of-the-way place, difficult for any considerable number to get to, and I wondered just how much of an audience would gather and how they would be impressed. So I went over from there. I was a few miles away. The road was dark and I pictured a small audience, but when I got there I found the church building in which he was to deliver the lecture had a seating capacity of 830, and that precisely 830 were already seated there, and that there was a fringe of others standing behind. Many had come from miles away, yet the lecture had scarcely, if at all, been advertised, and people said to one another, "Aren't you going to hear Dr. Conwell?" And the word had thus been passed along. I remember how fascinating it was to watch that audience, for they responded so keenly and with such heartfelt pleasure throughout the entire lecture. And not only were they immensely pleased and amused and interested, and to achieve that as at a crossroads church was in itself a triumph to be proud of, but they knew that every listener was given an impulse toward doing something for himself and for others, and that at least some of them the impulse would materialize into acts. Over and over one realized what a power such a man wields, and what an unselfishness. For far on his years as he is, and suffering pain, he does not chop down his lecture to a definite length. He does not talk for just an hour or go on grudgingly for an hour and a half. He sees that the people are fascinated and inspired, and he forgets pain, ignores time, forgets that the night is late and that he has a long journey to go to get home. He keeps on generously for 2 hours, and everyone there wishes it were 4. Always he talks with ease and sympathy. There are generally composure, humor, simple and homely jests, yet never does the audience forget that he is every moment in tremendous earnest. They bubble with responsive laughter or a silent and riveted attention. A stir can be seen to sweep over the audience of earnestness or surprise or amusement or resolve. When he is grave and sober or fervid, the people feel that he is himself a fervidly earnest man. And when he is telling something humorous, there is on his part an almost repressed chuckle, a genial appreciation of the fun of it, and not in the least as if he were laughing at his own humor, but as if he and his hearers were laughing together at something which they were all humorously cognizant. Myriad successes in life have come through the direct inspiration of this single lecture, for one hears of so many that there must be vastly more that are never told. A few of the most recent were told to me by Dr. Conwell himself, one being of a farmer's boy who walked along a great distance to hear him. On the way home, so the boy now a man has written him, he thought over and over of what he could do to advance himself, and before he reached home, he learned that a teacher was wanted in a certain country school. He knew that he did not know enough to teach, but was sure he could learn, so he bravely asked for the place, and something in his earnestness made him win a temporary appointment. Thereupon he worked and studied so hard and so devoutly, while he daily taught, that within a few months he was regularly employed there. And now, says Conwell abruptly, with his characteristic skimming over the intermediate details between the important beginning of a thing and the satisfactory end, and now that young man is one of our college presidents. And very recently a lady came to Dr. Conwell, the wife of an exceptionally prominent man who was earning a large salary, and she told him that her husband was so unselfishly generous with money that they often were almost in straits. And she said that they had bought a little farm on a country place, paying only a few $100s for it, and that she said to herself laughingly after hearing the lectures, "There are no acres of diamonds in this place." But she went on to tell him that he had found a spring of exceptionally fine water there, although in buying they had scarcely known of the spring at all, and she had been so inspired by Conwell that she had the water analyzed, and finding that it was remarkably pure, had begun to have it bottled and sold under a trade name as special spring water. She is making money, and she also sells pure ice from the pool, cut in winter time, all because of acres of diamonds. Several $1,000,000 in all have been received by Russell Conwell as his proceeds from this single lecture. Such a fact is almost staggering, and it is more staggering to realize what good is done in the world by this man, who does not earn for himself, but uses the money in immediate helpfulness. And one can neither think nor write with moderation when it is further realized that far more good than can be done directly with money he does by uplifting and inspiring with his lecture. Always his heart is with the weary and the heavy laden. Always he stands for self-betterment. Last year, 1914, he and his work were given unique recognition, for it was known by his friends that this particular lecture was approaching its 5,000th delivery, and they planned a celebration of such an event in the history of the most popular lecture in the world. Dr. Conwell agreed to deliver it in the Academy of Music in Philadelphia, and the building was packed and the street outside were thronged. The proceeds from all sources for that 5,000 lecture were over $9,000. The hold which Conwell has gained on the affections and respect of his home city was seen not only in the thousands who strove to hear him, but in the prominent men who served on the local committee in charge of the celebration. There was a national committee, too, and a nationwide love that he has won. The nationwide appreciation of what he has done and is still doing was shown by the fact that among the names of the notables on this committee were those of 9 governors of states, The governor of Pennsylvania was himself present to do Russell Conwell honor, and he gave him a key emblematic of the freedom of the state. The freedom of the state. Yes, this man, well over 70, has won it. The freedom of the state, the freedom of the nation. For this man of helpfulness, this marvelous exponent of the gospel of success, has worked marvelly for the freedom, the betterment, the liberation, the advancement of the individual. End of part 12.